I think two things are going on simultaneously here and in Ukraine and in other crises. One is the extraordinarily erratic behavior of the United States government, and personalized in Mr. Trump. He shocks the world. He shocks most Americans. Nobody can really rationalize the brazenness, the lawlessness, the viciousness of U.S. actions and of Trump's rhetoric. His line about sending Iran back to the Stone Age shocked everybody in the world, I think. We can add that his partner in this crime, Benjamin Netanyahu, gave a similarly shocking speech that fewer people saw the day before, and the start of the Jewish Passover holiday. And in the Passover holiday, which is the story of the Israelite exodus from Egypt, God visits 10 plagues on the Egyptian people. And in Netanyahu's speech, he visited 10 plagues on the Iranian people. It's again a speech of shocking brutality, and also a geopolitics, I would say, of maybe the 9th century BC. The mindset, the biblical framing, Netanyahu casting himself as God, is all so stark, so sharp that anyone that is watching what is happening right now sees that we have an extraordinarily violent war that seems to have justifications coming out of 9th century BC mindsets, or simply psychopathic ideas of sending other nations to the Stone Age. We heard Trump chortle about the destruction of a bridge in which 9 people were killed crossing the bridge, which was a non-military target, and reportedly 95 people injured at the attack on the bridge, and the president was delighted by that. So this is one thing that's happening, is all over the world and inside the United States, there is a sense of a absolutely violent and lawless regime in the United States. The second is the battlefield. American hegemony ultimately rests on the belief that America dominates the battlefield. And all of the rhetoric of Trump and Netanyahu has been since the start of this operation, but it's true in every U.S. operation, that shock and awe will overcome the foe, and that the inevitability of U.S. victory is so overwhelming that everyone will bow down to the United States. And more that idea is unraveling. One could say that it unraveled decades ago in Vietnam. One could say that the same failure was shown in Central America in the Contra Wars. One could argue that the same has been seen throughout the Middle East and Afghanistan, that this overwhelming force doesn't prevail. But each time the same proposition is put forward, that the might of the United States, the unprecedented ability to project power and force, is overwhelming. And Trump made that claim a couple of days ago, and then the next day, 2 American fighter jets were downed, and counterattacks came in Israel and in the Gulf region again. So to many observers, many people you are meeting with and discussing, the battlefield evidence is quite the contrary of what's being claimed by the United States. Iran seems to have continuing massive retaliatory force. The depletion of anti-missile systems seems to be real. The breakdowns of morale in the U.S., even reportedly forcing an aircraft carrier to return to base because of some kind of insurrection or insubordination or collapse of morale among the sailors, as reported, seems to show the opposite. So there's a fundamental question: what is America's power? And ultimately, that turns on its military and economic power. And second, what is America's intention? And that turns on the statements, the goals, the behavior of the U.S. government. And on both counts, this is a shocking period to, I mean, let's say on the question of aims and goals, this is shocking. We can't even piece together, as hard as we try, exactly why we're in this war. This seems really to be a war of whim. That's the best description that I've heard of it. And when it comes to American power, the debate is open, and the days will tell what the real situation is. But at least to this moment, the American and Israeli claim of shock and awe overwhelming the Iranian government is not true. And quite the contrary, it seems that there's a lot of worry, in fact, beneath the surface, that the ability to defend against especially the Iranian missile attacks is waning, and in the Gulf region almost non-existent. So this is why the whole world is watching this in amazement. We are seeing fundamental things play out, and they're also extremely dangerous. They can escalate to nuclear war without question. On the one side, on the side of Israel, I would say the level of violence, dehumanization of Israel's foes, the biblical language, which in this case of the Bible, the Old Testament story of the Israelite capture of their promised land, is so ruthless, so violent, so genocidal, that the rhetoric and mindset coming from Israel suggests no limits. That seems to be not just tactical. That seems to be actually ideological. The hatred for the other in Israel seems to be unbounded. And a difference of the U.S. and Israel is that in the United States, the public opposes the war quite overwhelmingly. And nothing that Trump has done has changed that. And this unease and opposition is very widespread. In Israel, I'm sorry to say, it seems that most of the public backs the war and backs the violence and backs the idea behind the war of the hatred of the other side and the belief that the other side is an implacable foe that must be totally annihilated, which again is maybe 9th century BC mentality, but it seems to be infused in the society.
Well, a common friend of ours, John Mersheimer, he keeps making the point that no one has told him any story of how this could end in a positive way, that is in U.S. victory. And it's a good point. I just find it difficult to see what the best possible outcome is. The whole idea that if there's just enough death, destruction, and carnage, then somehow the Iranians would simply capitulate. It seems like part of the problem with this strategy, though, is that what the U.S. demands of Iran is the capitulation would then become an existential threat. If they would have to give up even their conventional deterrent, what would stop the destruction of Iran. And there seems to be some parallels to the war or the proxy war against Russia. That is, if we just escalate enough, then we'll get a deal. But when your adversary considers this to be an existential threat, there is no bowing down. It's only escalation. So do you see any possible end to this war? Or how can this be ended? Because at the moment, it doesn't seem that Trump is willing to pack up and go home.
Well, I think that this is the point, the difference of can and will. Of course, Donald Trump can and should pack up and go home, but it's very unlikely to happen. And the backdrop of all of this is the continued American assertion of hegemony. That's not only Trump. That is the dominant American foreign policy idea that America must be and is the most powerful country in the world in every region, and must constantly prove that or demonstrate that if there are any doubts. So a war in Iran is not about Iranian issues. A war in Iran is about demonstrating America's full and unconstrained power, and it must be proved to the whole world that it is full and unconstrained. That's the backdrop. That goes beyond the question of Trump. But on top of that problem, which is the assertion of hegemony, which is a claim that the U.S. believes in and makes, but cannot fulfill, because the U.S. doesn't have the predominant power to do that, other than in utter destruction. There is the personality of Donald Trump. And personalities make a difference in wars. Wartime leaders make a difference. And the more we understand the situation in the U.S., the more the personality factor plays in. You know, we can give structural reasons for the American demands on hegemony. This is something that goes back decades. We can also talk about financial motivations and the pressures, or not even pressures, I should say, the lobbying and the money making from the war profiteers. There's no doubt that a lot of Silicon Valley, Palantir being case number one, is a great proponent of these wars. By the way, just parenthetically, they want to test their new AI-driven weapon system. So this is also for them experimentation. It's lab work. The fact that people are killed and there's a war, all the better. It's very realistic. We can see how these weapons work. There's a certain madness, greed, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars driving this. Same is true in Israel. So there's a side of this that is very direct. But I was saying that even with all of those structural features, the claims of hegemony, the size of the military-industrial complex, the huge money-making and grift that goes into this, the personal grift of Donald Trump and his family, who are the most corrupt officials in U.S. history. I mean, corrupt family and president in U.S. history. There's a personal element of psychological instability here that I believe is at work, which is that Donald Trump is psychopathic. This is a clinical judgment that is made by forensic psychologists and psychiatrists since he came on the public scene, and made repeatedly, and I think very cogently. This is not a man who gathers information and rationally processes it and maybe vicious, but is highly tactical, closes the deal, and so forth. This is an unhinged man who is impulsive, paranoid, psychopathic, and a megalomaniac. This is not the kind of person one wants in the presidency of the United States. I would say that Netanyahu has similar psychological traits. These are very violent, unhinged people. And it means that stepping back is not easy. Everything is a test for them of their own world, as well as more broadly, a test of the American political class mindset of hegemony, which, despite all the evidence to the contrary of the fact base of hegemony, is still believed in Washington. So we have a very big structural and individual problem of getting any kind of de-escalation or any kind of resolution. I have one and only one thought about this. Frankly, it's not a very persuasive one, perhaps, but it is the one that I've been holding, which is that Donald Trump listens to the extent that he listens at all. He listens to those he regards as his peers, and he does regard President Putin, President Xi, Prime Minister Modi as peers that he wants to be part of and live up to. These are leaders of superpowers. He inevitably, almost without exception, expresses respect for them, for the power that they hold, for their lead of superpower nations. They need to tell him to stop. I think it's extremely important. They need to tell him, Donald, this is not going anywhere. This is not going anywhere good. This is not helping you. It's not putting the United States in a better position. It is not helping any country in the world. It's dangerous. It needs to stop. I don't know if that is even remotely sufficient under these circumstances, but I think it is important to try. This is not the bluster, we're going to enter the war against you. Quite the contrary. It is to try to explain this has to stop, because if it continues on the path that it's continuing, it's going to bring us all to disaster.